chains. John, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad to have this. You know, I have the sheet paper manuscript version of this in a big binder, and it weighs a ton. So I'm glad to have like the efficient.
That's the short version.
It's the short version.
I wanted to write a 4-volume box set.
Oh yeah, I can imagine
that. As you do.
Right, when you're writing a commentary.
Oh, I know. And he wouldn't let the publisher wouldn't let me include John because he said,
too much.
I'm not publishing 1,000 pages by you. Somebody's got to put their foot down.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Yeah. It has
they
very
cut half of this.
Well, I wanted to have the rest of it. You know, as I was reading through your book, I was thinking, if you could speak to one of the gospel writers, which one would you speak to? What would you talk to that person about?
What a question, folks. Isn't that? But this is why.
Do you want me to answer the question while you're thinking?
Yes. This is why he's the great dean of Grace Cathedral. Malcolm Young. How about a round of applause for our hero?
You're so sweet.
And I want to thank you, Malcolm, for welcoming me. A few years ago, none of you will remember this, but Malcolm welcomed Anne Lamott, the great writer, and me for a wonderful evening upstairs. Yeah. And then the pandemic hit. But... yeah, what do you think about that?
I think because we have the synoptic gospels and they're variations of a similar theme, I think I'd like to talk to John.
Well, I'll explain John to you. I wrote a separate book.
Well, I'm waiting for that to come. I think that's the next thing.
No, I already wrote that.
Oh, yeah, I can't. Oh, yeah, I haven't read it.
So a couple of thoughts, and I don't know if the sound system is acting for me.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Okay, but really, thank you for having me and supporting my book. I would definitely ask Matthew why, because, see, I'm a big student of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, as my friends know, and as my friends are too. And Gandhi read from the Sermon on the Mount every morning and every evening for 45 years, Malcolm. Yeah. Did you know that?
Yeah, I've read the book.
You
read
it
in your book.
Yeah. I went to India with Gandhi's grandson, Arun Gandhi, for a month, who was raised by Gandhi, and we went to the places where they prayed, and he told me he heard Gandhi reading Matthew 5. Gandhi says, and it's a big challenge to all of us who dare claim to be Christian, that Matthew 5, 6, and 7 are the greatest teachings of nonviolence in the history of the world. And Gandhi says, I want to be a person of nonviolence. So that's a handbook. Yeah. It's how to be, not just how to be nonviolent, how to be a human being.
Right.
And, you know, Matthew brought all this stuff together none of it's in Mark. Yeah. Some of it's in Luke. And what happened is, so we all know Matthew, Mark, and Luke are written right around the year 70 when Rome came in and destroyed everything. John is written 50 years later. Yeah, it's a completely different story.
Yeah. And it's about a different time in the church, too, a different moment in Christian thought.
And a different attitude.
Yeah.
But I would like Matthew because, you know, he starts with, he has Jesus, he's speaking to the Jewish community. Jesus is the new Moses,
right.
The new law, the new commandments, and let's start with the Beatitudes, which leads up to, blessed are the peacemakers, you will be called the sons and daughters of the God of peace. Right there, he shatters our whole understanding of God. God is not a war maker. God is a peacemaker. And then we have the sixth antitheses. You've heard it said, but I say to you, leading up to the fifth one, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which is what we're seeing today. But I say to you, and this is in the Greek, offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. Gandhi read that every morning and every evening. That's the commandment. I'm speaking so loud that the mics are going to blow up. There's some, but isn't that fantastic? No, think about it. No one had said that before in history.
Yeah.
You have to. You can't use violence in response to violence. You have to engage in creative nonviolence, not passivity. You don't run away. You don't use the means of your opponent. And Gandhi says that's meant to be applied to the whole world and gets the British to leave India nonviolently. And Dr. King picks up on. But that's not even the climax. You've heard it said, love your country, men, and hate your enemies. But I say, love your enemies, the people being targeted by your nation state. then you're really sons and daughters of the God who lets the sun rise on the good and the bad, and the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. In other words, in that most political sentence in the entire Bible, we have the first and clearest explanation of the mystery of God. Yeah. God practices universal love and total nonviolence. Gandhi read that. I want to ask Matthew more about that. And my friend is Jim Lawson, who was Dr. King's great friend and teacher. And
everything's good. It's just
I'm having a senior moment. I forgot what Jim Lawson said.
Here, I'll just go fix it.
It'll come back to me, and I'll try to impress you.
It will,
but it won't work.
Yeah. I love that. And when we're going through the year of Matthew in the preaching lectionary, I do think about how Matthew is so grounded in that prophetic tradition and in a way that makes him.
He transformed it all. He went beyond the prophets, and no one had said any of that. In fact, everything is the Hebrew scriptures are the story of a violent God and violent people, and slowly then you get the wisdom literature and the feminine Sophia, and then you get the prophets, but it all leads up to, they're all like Sandinistas. It's a violence for justice and the poor. And Jesus, and John the Baptist, I think, is a little bit of that. And Jesus is Gandhi and Dr. King. He's like something completely new. How did that happen? And, but just to say for a second, so the story of Matthew, Mark, and Luke is the same story. I always joke, and maybe I'll say this upstairs if you think you give me permission. Jesus thinks he's Gandhi. That wasn't funny? Jesus thinks he's Dr. King. He teaches nonviolence and organizes a grassroots nonviolence movement from Galilee to Jerusalem. They march.
Yeah.
And
I think that's what I liked about the book is that it's almost like it gives me an image, because I know, from reading the accounts of what it was like for Gandhi and for Dr. King to form organizations, to have people that they're teaching, to confront the authorities, so it gave me seeing Jesus in that picture.
As a movement organizer. Yeah. Luke brings that out more, but what about John? Is 50 years later. Jesus marches and does civil disobedience in the temple. John starts his story with the civil disobedience in the temple. Yeah. He rewrites the whole story. Yeah. There's no nonviolence per se. What his words are life and death, 150 times. If you have life in you, you'll be full of life and you have eternal life now. But if you do the works of death and you have death, then you're not going to have life because you're full of death and therefore you're already dead. Yeah. And everybody goes, what? Yeah. But from a Gandhian Kingian hermeneutic, it makes sense. But then John builds up, and in the Greek, in John chapter 9, it has this incredible sentence. Jesus walked by and saw a man born blind from birth, right?
Yeah.
No, that's not what it says.
What?
The Greek, Jesus walked by and saw humanity born blind from birth. There's no article in the Greek word for man. Isn't that cool? And so all of the parables and stories in John are about Jesus against humanity. So they tell the story of Lazarus. Lazarus is humanity stuck in death.
Right.
In the culture of death and permanent war, David. And Jesus is the God of life and nonviolence who calls humanity out of the tombs with the 3 new commandments. Roll away the stone.
Yeah.
Lazarus, come forth. Humanity, come out of the culture of death.
Right.
And he stands there, unbind humanity and let him go free. That's John.
The son of humanity. The son of the...
Yeah, but Lazarus symbolizing humanity stuck in death. And we don't want... Martha and Mary try to stop the resurrection of Lazarus because we don't want life.
Well, yeah, right.
We don't want hope. We don't want resurrection.
Because it's different and new.
It's so scary.
Yeah.
As Phil Berrigan said to me when we were in jail, we can't handle that much hope. Yeah. We're quite comfortable with despair. We like despair. There's no hope and there's nothing you can do. Oh, thank God. Yeah. Now I get to stay home, watch TV,
do whatever I want.
Whatever we want. No. get out and get with the movement. That's what our guy says. Jesus.
Jesus.
Hey, you better interrupt me because I'll just keep talking.
So tell me, like when you were a kid, what kind of kid were you? What kind of books did you read? What kind of people influenced you? Like, was there a sign that that you were going to grow up to be this?
My friends are here, and I'm afraid they'll tell you a story. You know, I'll be 65 this summer, Malcolm. I grew up in Washington, D.C. My father was the head of the National Press Club. Now, think about that in the 60s.
Yeah.
So we grew up with senators and congresspeople in the White House, and I was appalled by all of it.
Yeah.
And a totally politically aware kid, because it was all Vietnam all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Knew all about Dr. King. I'd seen racism where I was born in North Carolina, and the Klan had threatened my father and us boys. And to be honest with you, we were out at dinner that night, April 4th. My mother woke me up at 5. I was about 9, and she said, "They killed Martin Luther King. You have to get up." And she sat me in front of the TV, and then my dad said, "No, I'm taking him to see." So we went downtown and saw the curfew and the troops and the riots, and he told me to remember it. Then he took me to the Poor People's Campaign, and I saw Resurrection City. And we all put all our hopes in Bobby Kennedy. You're too young to remember any of this.
I am. But just a little bit.
Yeah, we have nothing like these. And we killed the 2 greatest people our country ever produced. And I was very alive to God when I was born, and politically aware at the same time. I'm very weird, as my friends know. And I went into an existential funk, and for 10 years. And I went to Duke to get away from the Catholic Church, a good Methodist school. I thought you'd laugh at that, but you all think that was a reasonable decision.
Seems reasonable to me.
My plan was to be a rock star, and then I thought I was in a wild fraternity with my friend Dr. Paul Farmer. He was in the room next to me. We never slept. We just partied and studied. And I thought, and I said to Paul, "We're not going to believe in God anymore. Let's just go really crazy." And we both had these profound conversions. Like I one day, for me, and Paul for a month later. Of course I believe in God. Well, what am I saying? Well, then I have to give my whole life to Jesus.
Yeah.
And my next thought, Malcolm, was, oh my God, I'm going to have to become a Jesuit. And that's what I did. And my parents, it was all because of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. Yeah. And my next thought was, well, I told my parents, they were appalled and begged me not to. So I worked for Bobby Kennedy's family. I was at 20 years old. It was a weird life. Assistant to Bobby Kennedy's best friend, David Hackett, who founded the Robert Kennedy Memorial, which is still roaring away. Yeah. And they're all my friends still, the Kennedys. And I thought, well, if I'm going to give my life following this guy, I am coming to the end of the story. I want to know where he lived. Yeah. So I told my parents, Mom, I'm packing up to go hitchhiking through Israel for 3 months to see where Jesus lived. And she went, it's worse than I thought. And the week I left, Israel invaded Lebanon, the summer war of 1982. And it was all orchestrated by the Pentagon. It was called Operation Peace for Galilee. I researched it for my autobiography, and we killed 60,000 people in those 3 months. I flew on an empty plane to Tel Aviv. Now I can't believe I did it. And in fact, I hitchhiked, and then totally empty. There were no tourists, and back then there was nothing there. And I camped out by the Sea of Galilee for 2 weeks. It was fantastic, and no one's there, and I'm a dopey kid, totally oblivious. And there's a hill on the North Shore, and a chapel smaller than this room. And I walked in, and it says, there was graffiti on the wall of the little chapel, like your chapel upstairs. Yeah. And it said, "Blessed are the poor." What is that about? Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek, the gentle, the nonviolent. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. What? Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure of heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those persecuted for justice, and on the altar at the chapel of the Beatitudes it said, love your enemies. And I thought, oh my God, I think he's serious. Never thought about that in my life. Yeah. I thought my plan was to be a pious Jesuit or priest, which, as you see, didn't work out. And I walked out on the balcony, and I'm talking to God, and just like, and I'm going to say this upstairs. Like, you mean these words are meant for me? I'll never forget. Still shocking, isn't it? Yeah. Like, we're intended to live these words. This is what the poor guy wants. Peacemakers, people who not only work to end wars, but practice universal love. And I thought, right, I'll do it, but you kind of have to convince me. Boom, there are all these explosions. Just then, and 3 Israeli jets fell from the sky, breaking the sound barrier, setting off sonic booms, and I saw the jets swoop over the Sea of Galilee and drop bombs in the border of Lebanon, 15 miles away, and kill people. And it changed my life. I only later realized it had been going on every hour. Yeah. And who cares? Yeah. I don't care. We didn't care. I was all wrapped up in myself, but I opened my eyes for a second in case God appeared, I always say. And what I saw was the reality of the world, which is mass murder. This beautiful place. At the place where Jesus said, love your enemies, and blessed are the peacemakers. And I hit the ground running and joined the Berrigans and then David Hartsoe, and it's been down. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, you've been in a lot of different war zones. I wonder if you can talk about what that's like and what you've learned from those experiences. Because it's not like you just had that experience and then you never went back again.
No, I've been very serious. I mean, it's why I'm here today. As my friends know, I've not changed that much. But it's strange because I was dopey and still am. But I thought, well, I don't know how to do any of this. I better go ask people. So I went and met Daniel and Philip Berrigan. And then I saw Coretta Scott King, and I said, how do I do this? Yeah. And she became my friend, and Mother Teresa and Thich Nhat Hanh and Tutu. I thought all this was normal. Yeah. And then I was with the families of the 4 church women killed in 1980, right. You remember? Yeah. In 1982, Pat Donovan, the mother of Jean Donovan, said to me, well, if you're so passionate about peace, you should go and get killed in El Salvador like my Jeannie. And I was like, okay. And I did. And I went to El Salvador to answer the first question. And I didn't know what I was heading into, that it was total warfare, and that I was welcomed by the Jesuits who run the university. And you know where the story is going? The 6 Jesuit priests were brutally assassinated in 1989. They were my friends. Yeah. And they held a dinner party for the night I arrived there. You go and be with these guys. Because no young Jesuit had ever been. Yeah. And we're in a little dining room, and they're laughing and carrying on, and the whole room is covered with bullet holes. And they had been bombed 21 times before I arrived in 1985, and strafed many times. And they were going, yeah, we'd be having dinner here, John. You could just see the black van come down and the machine gun pull out, and it would open fire, and we'd just duck under the table, and they'd drive away, and we'd go on with dinner. And I'm like, and they were trying to impress me, and it worked. And they were laughing at the old guy who was 80, and he said, tell him the story. And he says, yeah, one night the bomb went off my window, and my bed flew across the room, and I remained asleep. And they all start laughing at him. Doesn't know how to wake up during a proper bombing. And one of them, John Sobrino, turns to me and goes, so this is what it means to be a Christian, John. Yeah. We're against violence on all sides. Yeah. And everybody hates us. And everyone wants to kill us. And we're not going to leave because aren't we followers of Jesus? Yeah. And they sent me out to a refugee camp that was being bombed every hour. And my sole job, I had long blonde hair then as a kid. My sole job was when the death squads came in, I was to go out and hopefully they'd shoot me, or they would leave because an American, clearly a gringo was there. And and they just threw me to the dogs, these Jesuits. And kind of hoping I would get killed, because it was full-on war. It was horrific. And I talk about learning nonviolence, Malcolm. I decided that the best strategy was to be the stupid American or gringo, which comes easy for me. And I would be, hi, can I get you some coffee? And they got machine guns, And I was just so stupid that they go, well, you can't work with this guy. They would leave. And I came back to the poor people going, I talked them out of it. It was terrifying. And being with them was electrifying, but being with the poor campesinos, every person in the camp had run out the back door as the death squads killed all their families. So these were the survivors, and we were being bombed. I had never to this day encountered such faith and joy. And I had long conversations with the Jesuits about, what does this mean? And they go, now you, and they Korea, who's the president and the reason they were assassinated, said, you're beginning now, John, not just to learn what it means to be a Christian, but a human being. And, after that experience, and I was at GTU, and we all got arrested when they were killed at the federal building here. I, went to Iraq. I lived in Northern Ireland. I went to Afghanistan. I don't remember else where I've been. I've been everywhere around the world. But after that experience, after El Salvador, I did a plowshares action with Philip Berrigan, where we hammered on a nuclear weapon. And I faced 20 years in prison. I'm an ex-con. I can't vote anymore. I can't travel. I've been invited recently again to speak at Hiroshima, and I'm not allowed in Japan or Canada. And I'm highly monitored by the government. It's very exciting, Malcolm. I highly recommend it.
It is. I wanted to ask you about that,
But the thing is, you go forward, and after El Salvador, they want to put you into nothing. I mean, these 6 guys were brutally killed, and not to gross you out, but then they removed their brains and left them next to their bodies. And to send a message to Latin America, this is what you get if you think about trying to make a difference, that you can make a difference. If you had been friends with great teachers like that, you'd do anything. And that's what the gospel's about today. You realize that great Jesus is, or the Berrigans, or Gandhi, or Dr. King. You drop everything to follow these great people. And I'm not bright enough to realize that we're just going to go with it. And it's a great adventure. That's my experience. That's what it's like. And why not try to be a peacemaker and do what you can to end war and nuclear weapons? And we're only here on earth a short time. And that was my big conversion at Duke, Malcolm. Like I was going to die. I couldn't figure out, the deaths of Martin and Bobby had such an impact on me. No one gets around death. And we're having a great time in the fraternity, Paul and I. And I couldn't figure out, we all have this common denominator. We're going to die. We're going to meet God. We're going to meet Jesus. And God's going to say, I love you so much. And what did you do to help my poor people in creation? And I thought, I better get ready. And Paul thought the same thing, and that's what got us involved.
I can imagine. I mean, you've been arrested more than 85 times. You've been around the world. When you are arrested, when you're interacting with people who are putting you in prison, putting you on lists, denying you the ability to travel, what are some of the stories about your interaction with the people who've opposed you in your nonviolent actions? And
this is why he's the dean. That's a great question. How much time do we have? Can we go till
2 hours.
Or 3? Okay.
They're going to send.
This is what I tried to write in this book. That everything we think, are you sitting down? Everything we think about Jesus is wrong. can I just say something big? Like, everybody thinks Jesus is yelling and screaming.
I agree.
You brood of vipers.
Completely.
Not at all.
Even when I read it, it's like
that
it's like
at all.
you brood of vipers.
He's not even like that. Because I can tell you why. Because he's so gentle and totally nonviolent. We project all this anger and violence onto him, and you can't get it from the pages. But I've met the saints, and my friends know me and will forgive me for name dropping. But because of the Berrigans, I was very close with Thich Nhat Hanh for 30 years, the Zen Buddhist master.
Completely.
And I was with him many times at his house and all, and Thich Nhat Hanh would be like, you all know who he is, the Zeus.
Yeah.
He'd be like, John, just insane, trying to destroy the planet. And you'd be going, what? He'd be, they're insane. You're insane, allowing your country to bomb and kill people and build nuclear wars. You're like tombs with dead men walk over, or hypocrites, or a brood of vipers. That's our Jesus.
Yeah.
And I've had this with conversation in the Vatican and with all kinds of theologians, and I think I've changed their minds. So when Jesus does civil disobedience, as my friends and I know, you're like Thich Nhat Hanh and Gandhi. You see Dr. King in the films. They're doing training. We train, and we go in so calm, cool, and collected. You can't go to the Pentagon, the White House. I don't remember. I'm banned from all your favorite military bases. Everywhere in the country, I have lifelong bans.
From Travis?
Thank you very much. Huh?
Travis Air Force Base?
Vandenberg, Livermore Labs, Concord Naval Weapons Station, all the federal buildings. How much time have you had? The White House, the State Department, the Pentagon. I was recently arrested at the Supreme Court, as you do, over the death penalty. And boy, they threw us against the wall and threw us in a cell covered with cockroaches. Yeah. And I was going, Jesus, you didn't have to deal with this. But that's another conversation. But you're really nonviolent, as Jesus is in the temple.
Right.
My problem is not the police. They're trained to be violent.
Right.
The judge is yelling at me. Yeah. I can tell you so many stories you wouldn't believe it. My problem, Malcolm, is church people. I am used to been trained to go in. You go and be thrown to the dogs with death squads in El Salvador.
Yeah.
I feel I can face anything now.
Yeah.
And I have. I've been in court hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And
so what do you hope?
But it's when I meet bishops and priests and ministers who kick me out and ban me as continues to happen.
That's the hard part, like just being rejected by your own people.
I still expect the church to want to hear about Jesus and his nonviolence.
Yeah, completely.
And no.
Yeah.
And it's never, and it always is a shock and a scandal to me. And I've been kicked out of 30 dioceses, Catholic dioceses in the United States.
Gosh.
And I've had experiences with the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., too, which I better not tell on the tape, they lost a $5 million pledge because of my presence there. Thank you very much. And so, but money, it's about money.
Yeah, so there's that part, but like I said, when you're face to face with that person, opposite of you, what do you want that person to experience of you? What do you want that person to take away from that encounter that they're having with you, that one-on-one encounter? Because everything kind of boils down to that in some ways, yeah?
Jesus.
Yeah. So you want that person to come away and say, I met...
And to be different.
Yeah.
Like I was once with... I was really involved in September 11th and coordinated the chaplains. We had 600 chaplains dealing with 50,000 direct relatives, and I worked at Ground Zero 24/7 for 3 months. It was very difficult. But meanwhile, every Saturday we were having marches, and I was coordinating that against the impending war in Afghanistan and Iraq. So Dan Berrigan and I and our Jesuit friends held a peace vigil in Union Square. If you've been to New York, there were like that, at all times, there's about 300,000 people milling around. We had these massive banners, don't bomb Iraq, don't bomb Afghanistan, and this wild guy in an army uniform came up to crazy yelling, and he charged me, and he said, I'm going to kill you right now in front of everybody. And Dan is looking at me like, oh, this ought to be interesting. And he goes, what would you do if I killed you right now? And the whole part calmed down. And I said, well, I'd go right to heaven, and I'd get to be with Jesus and the saints, and I'd live happily ever after. You, on the other hand, would be arrested and put in prison for the rest of your life, and a lot of people would want to have you killed. But my priest friends here would be praying for you, and I would be too, and we'd hope you'd get over it. And the guy was so shocked, like, this guy is so nuts. He just kind of walked away. And a Catholic worker friend went over and started talking to him. And he burst into tears, and he came back and apologized and joined the movement.
Yeah.
This is what you do with everybody. When I was in a cell with Phil Berrigan the size of this rug for 9 months. We never left. But it was fine with me because I was expecting 20 years in prison. I was happy to get out. And the bed, my bunk Phil was here, I was here, the toilet was here, food came through the slot in the door there. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And we just read the Bible, and we had Wonder Bread, and they gave us a little plastic cup of grape juice, which we found if you hid in the top of the toilet, it ferments quite nicely over time.
Yeah. Right.
So we broke the bread and passed the cup, and Jesus was right there with us. Anyway, the point being, the warden, the New York Times came, it was Philip Berrigan, 2020, do you remember that old TV show?
Yeah,
They came and they're filming us, and all this press, it was nonstop press. And the warden, big fat guy, comes in, and he tells us he ran the Klan. This is in North Carolina when he was young, and this, that, and the other thing. We don't have anything else to do, so we're just listening to this guy, and he just talks for an hour every morning. And you can't say, sorry, I gotta go.
I've got an appointment at 9.
I have an appointment. I'd love to hear more. But this went on every morning for 9 months. After a couple of months of this, he was organizing our press and our visits for us and wanted us to be friends for the rest of our lives. I think we overdid it with the conversion, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, that's great.
This is what you do.
Yeah.
So get to the point, Malcolm, where they kick you out. They want you out of the jail because you start organizing and everything. You can't run a jail when everybody's so happy, and especially when you sing.
Right.
Lots of hymns. That doesn't go over well when they're trying to be mean and violent to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Bring it on, Amazing Grace. I'm trying to cheer these people up, and they're looking at me like I've had too much coffee.
We need it. Hey, so one of my favorite parts of the book is you're talking about Jesus touching the leper, and you're like, Jesus touching the leper was an illegal act. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just like how do you decide about when to do an illegal act and when not to? Like how does that discernment happen?
That's such a great question. Everything is about prayer and community and friends. And I learned that early on from the Berrigans. That's why, so what I do, I have a kindergarten level spirituality, Malcolm, so forgive me.
Yeah.
I just sit with Jesus every morning and tell him my problems, and he goes, oh, you're doing great, kid. I love you. Get back out there. That's about my prayer life. Yeah. And
I love that. I had this mental image as you're doing it like a basketball coach at halftime. Okay, you gave over 14 turnovers, but I'm sure you're going to do better in the next half.
You mean Jesus?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, he's like relentless.
Exactly.
And but he's a really nice guy. And I always say, oh, you say that to everybody. But anyway, so you ask Jesus, and as I get older, I've written another book, as you do, just beyond this, because what I realized, I still can't remember what Jim Lawson told me.
Oh, yeah, you'll think of it later.
In the middle of the homily.
We have another 2 hours.
Oh, good. What were we talking about? I'm sorry.
We're talking about deciding to do illegal
so we're
things.
always asking Jesus, what do you want me to do? And during the pandemic, I realized that the key to how Jesus lived such spectacular nonviolence was total surrender to God. Total surrender, not my will, your will be done. So that's what every day, I'm too old now, Malcolm, for anything else. Jesus, I don't care. You've been so good to me. I'll do whatever you want. You want me to go preach at Grace Cathedral?
All right, I guess I'll do it.
Well, you want me to I'd rather get arrested.
Right,
But anyway,
can't I go back to Livermore?
Yeah, can't we go to Livermore, Dave? Well, anyway, so you discern, but for Jesus, it's not, the thing about Jesus is, Malcolm, everything he did was illegal. Because in this world, it's legal to kill people. It's legal to to blow up the planet and to have genocide in Gaza and catastrophic climate change. And there's 110 conflicts and wars happening on the planet right now. I was working this week with NCR about that. And it's legal to have 5 billion people in extreme poverty. It's legal to execute people. Racism, sexism, torture is totally legal. In fact, they want it. Many, many people are making billions by planning the destruction of the planet. Jesus sees all that. He's way beyond Gandhi and Dr. King. Malcolm, I forgot to mention in this book that the Gospel of Matthew begins with civil disobedience and ends with civil disobedience. And I wrote a whole book on it called The Sacrament of Civil Disobedience and came up with 14 different categories of civil disobedience that Jesus did. It begins with the Epiphany. Isn't we still in the Epiphany?
Yeah, totally, we're in the Epiphany.
So the wise men or whoever,
the Magi,
they come, it's political, they're going to see King Herod and then they're going to see the child. Once you encounter the nonviolent Jesus, you do civil disobedience and go home a different way.
You go back by a different road, exactly.
You're resisting. And everything, the touching the leper, he's breaking all. The first time I met Daniel Berrigan, he said to me, Jesus does all the wrong things at the wrong times in the wrong places to the wrong people. And this is the guy we followed, John. Oh, this is why I am the way I am. And so, he's doing civil disobedience left and right. I mean, just walking illegally on the border of Samaria, they could kill him. Hanging out with women, allowing women in the inner circle, you could be killed for that. I could go on and on. But when you march into Jerusalem, into the temple, which is the only place on the planet where God lives, and they charge money to get in and charge extra money for you horrible people who are really unholy because you're so unholy, and it's a banking system, and he does nonviolent civil disobedience. He doesn't hurt anybody. They're going to kill you. And so then the execution of Jesus, and those of us who've been arrested, like Dave and I, know this well, is meticulously legal.
Right.
Everything about killing Jesus is done just so.
Yeah.
We got him. But Malcolm is so fantastic because he's such I call Jesus a one-man crime wave going through the Roman Empire. They can't contain him, so what do? The idiots, the Roman Empire, all soldiers and politicians, they said, okay, we'll put the troops at the tomb and we'll put the imperial seal on the rock. Matthew has 7 verses about it because it's so darn funny for us.
Yeah.
And it says, we killed you, you're dead, so stay dead. Don't you see how outrageous that is? And Jesus breaks the law and rises from the dead.
Yeah. Even that law he breaks.
In fact, the resurrection is the first true revolution of nonviolence. And it's turning over the tables of death itself. Resurrection means having nothing to do with death, therefore nothing to do with violence. Therefore, living and getting ready for resurrection means practicing complete, total Gandhian, Kingian nonviolence like Jesus. It's so darn exciting.
Yeah.
And this is what all my teachers were about, and I'm still excited about it, and I'm way beyond making a difference or being effective or having results, but because Jesus was so great, and all the great people I've met were like that. So periodically, as Dan taught me, the only way change happens from Jesus to Gandhi to Dr. King today is bottom-up people, power, grassroots movements. Yeah. So everybody's got to be involved in some movement. Pick a cause and get involved, period. You can't do everything, okay, but everybody can do something. Yeah. But from the abolitionists to the suffragists to the labor movement to Gandhi's movement to the civil rights movement to the thousands of movements to now, we do need some frontline people. Yeah. Good people who break bad laws and accept the consequences, disciples of Jesus, who take risks. That's what I learned from the Berrigans and from the Jesuit martyrs. And I've known probably 100 people who've been killed. I mean assassinated, including in Northern Ireland and Iraq and Afghanistan. I can tell you their names. Yeah. And so taking risks. And I've gone on, so can I tell you one more story?
Yeah, tell me one more story, and then I've got a next question.
So I'm in jail with Philip Berrigan.
Yeah, right. And that little, I'm never going to see this carpet in the same way again.
Yeah, I wish we had this carpet.
Gosh.
Phil and I each got 50 letters a day. And it was piling up, and the jailers were so mad at us. And every letter, I counted them, because there's nothing else to do, and I'm a little nuts, but they all said, oh, you're so wonderful. I wish I had your courage. And then I got, and just forgive me for my name dropping, I got 2 letters about 6 months in. One from Mother Teresa and one from Joan Chittister in the same week. Oh. Mother Teresa said, Dear John, oh, thank God you're suffering. I'm not kidding you. No. She said, it's about time we had a priest in jail for following Jesus. Good, I'm gonna come and see you, kid. And then I'm going, there was no
love, Mother Teresa?
No love. God bless you, and good luck.
Yeah, right.
Mother Teresa. And then Joan Chittister, who's a theologian, she writes, Dear John, well, you're reminding us, kid, that the only way to positive social change is not what we think. It's through the pastoral mystery. Good luck carrying the cross of Jesus. There was nothing encouraging or fun or feel good about that. And wow.
Yeah.
And then Philip Berrigan, he got mad at one day because this letter said, I wish I had your courage. And Phil turns to me and goes, can you believe these people? They wish they had our courage. I'm, 30 years old? I don't know what the heck he's talking about. And I'm going, I wish I had Phil's courage. And I'm in jail with him. I went, no, I can't believe those people. I'm so scared of Phil. I'm going, tell me more what you mean. He goes, those people, they think it's courage. And I'm going, I thought it was courage too. He said, it has nothing to do with courage, John. I know. What is it about? Get it, Phil? He goes, it's all about faith. Do we believe in God or not?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Phil. What was your question?
That was a good one. The next question, in the last 6 months, or since October 7th,
yes.
What we've seen in Israel and Gaza has been so shocking. What do you think the world is learning from what's unfolding in that place now? And just how its ramifications just everywhere.
That Jesus was right, and Gandhi and Dr. King was right. That violence in response to violence only leads to further violence. Yeah. That war doesn't work. That what you reap what you sow. The means are the ends. That war never brings peace. That violent retaliation never brings justice. That it's an eye for an eye, as Gandhi said, going to make the whole world blind. And that's why Gandhi read that sentence that nobody reads from the Sermon on the Mount. Offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. All of this is to be predicted, Malcolm.
Yeah.
Hamas, the occupation has been going on for how many decades? Yeah. And 75 years, and I've been many times. I led once an interfaith delegation. We were a rabbi, imam, and a Catholic priest, people from all different faiths. And whatever group got mad at one of us, we were able to respond. When the Jewish settlers were mad, the rabbi went out. When the Muslims got mad, the imam went out. And when the Christians got mad, I went out. And we were all united in the vision of shalom.
Yeah.
Salam.
Right.
Peace be with you. Nonviolence. So nothing surprises me. I don't see the world learning anything.
Yeah.
And that we're still stuck in the endless downward spiral of violence. But what we need is to listen to the holy Jewish peacemakers who have long been against the war and the occupation, great heroes in Israel that I've met, and the Palestinians for peace and nonviolence. 20 years ago, I got a year of letters to come to speak to the Palestinian people about nonviolence, and I spent a year saying no, because I can't. And they begged, and I went, and there were 1,000 people, and me and the Cardinal of Jerusalem were the speakers in Bethlehem. And they just wanted the encouragement.
Yeah.
But unless we put down the sword, as Jesus said, and refuse the cycle of retaliation, an eye for an eye, on all sides, Hamas, Israel, Ukraine, NATO, Russia, the sides in Africa, the nuclear weapons by the United States on all sides, the U.S. weapons manufacturing is paying for weapons on war on all sides. We're on for all wars and all armies and every war. Yeah. We're funding it. Unless we all renounce all of that, as Martin Luther King said, and adopt Jesus' way of nonviolence, we're doomed toward our self-destruction. And because of Ukraine and now Gaza and the threat of nuclear war and catastrophic climate change, we're getting rid of all peace treaties left and right. Yeah. And the rush on war is full on, and we all go blindly over the cliff. And we don't have to. And I blame, as does John in the Gospel of John, if you read the fine print in the Greek, he says the problem is Christians. Because none of us are following the Sermon on the Mount like Gandhi and Dr. King did. Yeah. If we could, Malcolm, I hope you and I can always preach the Sermon on the Mount for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, me too. Every time it comes up, I just feel like such a blessing.
That's all. That's our job. And to help the church, this is what we've been saying at the Vatican, that the church has to become the followers of the nonviolent Jesus, and therefore a community of active, creative nonviolence. Dr. King was trying so hard to do that. And if we really were going to learn a lesson, we would cut funding toward weapons on all sides. And we would abolish our nuclear weapons. And we would fund nonviolent grassroots peace movements in Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia. The thousands of Russians who are going to jail for refusing to join Putin's army.
Exactly.
I've heard great things about the nonviolence movement in Ukraine. But we are behind that war with NATO. We're funding the Israeli occupation, and I could go on and on. So we all have to wake up and say no, and stand up and say we're not anti-Semitic. Yeah. We want the Jewish vision of shalom. We want human rights for Palestinian children. We want a new nonviolent Middle East. Yeah. We want the abolition of nuclear weapons and war on the planet. We want a new nonviolent United States, a nonviolent world. The kingdom of God is at hand.
So one of our traditions we have is we keep people write questions on little note cards from the audience. So we're collecting those. So while you're writing your questions,
haven't we resolved everything?
We haven't. There's more. So when I was oh my gosh, 18 or so, I met Michael Nagler in Berkeley.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, a lovely person.
Such a great peacemaker.
Oh, I know. What a good heart. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you kind of claimed nonviolence for yourself, how you learned about it, just so that people can know a little bit more about how they might become a nonviolent. And
well, thank you. Gosh, how do you come up with these questions? They're really good.
I sat in the chair and I said, Jesus, your friend John is coming this morning.
I knew Jesus was behind all this. Sister Helen Prejean calls him Sneaky Jesus.
Sneaky Jesus.
I was just with her at the Met for the opening of the opera Dead Man Walking.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God. It was so political. Yeah. I'm talking about New York City, the Met.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. And she kept talking about this sneaky Jesus. He won't stop.
So how did you learn nonviolence?
Oh, so when I'm really grappling with that statement, and I saw in the Chapel of the Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers. And you'll just laugh at me because everybody does. It's 1982. When you enter the Jesuits, they put you on a 30-day silent retreat called the spiritual exercises, and they brainwash you early on. I thought that was pretty funny, but obviously you think
well, I was just thinking, I was thinking, I could probably prepare him for being in prison by himself.
Exactly. I was totally a novitiate. Well, just any Jesuit community, but I won't go there. And I couldn't figure out who I was. What does it mean to be a human being? This is what Paul Farmer and I used to talk about. We were very impressed with Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. We were wild kids at Duke. We used to talk about that a lot. And, the culture is always telling us who we are. You're a good American, Malcolm. Yeah. Who do you think you are? You're a Republican. You're a Democrat. And then do you remember in the 70s, you probably don't remember, there was a TV commercial that said, be all you can be.
I do remember that.
Join the Marines, kill for the United States, and you'll be who you are. I'm on the silent retreat, and I'm reading, blessed are the peacemakers. You are the beloved Son of God. You are the beloved daughter of God. I felt Jesus is the first person to tell me who I was. And then later I became good friends with this writer, Henry Nouwen.
Oh, yeah, right. He was a teacher at
and
my
he
school.
had that book, Life of the Beloved.
Yeah.
And I used to say, you got to go more than that, Henry. And he'd say, no, people were too sick. They can't even grasp that they're beloved by God. And I was trying to get him to say, you're the beloved son and daughter of God. The God is a God of peace. Therefore, you have to be a peacemaker. You see my logic?
And I do.
And he said, no one can handle peace and nonviolence, John. And this country's too sick. But that's the key and Jesus, I think, is the only person who claimed his identity. Yeah. He hears it at the baptism. And then the whole thing with the temptations in the desert, they're temptations to violence. You think you're beloved by God? Prove it. Turn stones into bread. He could have ended world hunger. Throw yourself off, do violence. If you are the Son of God, if you are the Son of God, and as he's being killed, if you are the Son of God, come down. No, I know who God is. I'm going to claim my identity. That's how he's nonviolent. So I started working on that. But then I've been talking about nonviolence every day for 45 years. And then I began to really rethink Gandhi's and King's definitions. I had this conference. I called it the first ever National Conference of Nonviolence. And I brought Jim Lawson in and all these big names 10 years ago. And I'm up there foaming at the mouth about nonviolence is this and that. It's a way of life. It's a tactic and a strategy. It's a spiritual path toward a new future of peace and the God of peace. No, it's a political methodology that always works when we engage in it. And Jim Lawson takes the podium and goes, John doesn't know anything about nonviolence. He was Dr. King's great friend. And he says, Martin and I this is what he said. Nonviolence is power. It's all from Luke 10. I have given you power.
Right.
And he said, the country, the world, the culture of war and racism and violence says you're powerless. There's nothing you can do. Jesus comes along and gives you power. You're empowered with the power of active nonviolence to bring down the culture of war. Wow. Well, but what I wanted to say was what's helped me was this little book I wrote, and I'm still living off it about 10 years ago, called The Nonviolent Life. And there, how do we reach the level of Gandhi and Dr. King?
Yeah.
And I think nonviolence, now this is what I'm working on, requires 3 simultaneous attributes. You have to do all 3. And we only want to do 1, maybe 2, but nobody does all 3. 1, totally nonviolent to yourself from now on. This country, there's so much self-hatred and we beat ourselves up. This is all of Thich Nhat Hanh. Non-cooperate with your inner violence. Cultivate interior peace. Make a place for the God of peace to live with inside you. Don't beat yourself up. And it feels better. You're happier if you go around more peaceful. I'm just not going to be violent to myself. Second, at the same time, you don't wait till you're perfectly non. You have to be meticulously nonviolent toward every human being, your spouse, your children, your parents, your neighbor, everyone at Grace Cathedral, everyone in the country, everyone in the world, and the creatures and Mother Earth. Totally nonviolent toward everyone. Now, even the best of us have a few people we'd like to, just get back at with a little revenge.
Right,
I'm just a little. Give me a little, something. The Pope or at least the president or the former president or somebody. No. And it's strange that person becomes your teacher because whoever that difficult person in your life is exposing your violence. How are we going to be able to stand on the street and call for an end to this, that, or the other if we're not dealing with our inner violence and our personal relationships? Because that's going to trigger us unless we're... But that's still not it. At the same time, you have to have one foot in the global grassroots movement of nonviolence. You have to pick a cause and get involved. So if you see, this is how I now speak of Jesus' path of nonviolence. There's these two extremes, and there's a lot of us just trying to be really peaceful, nice people. That's not the gospel. That's not Jesus, and that's not nonviolence, and it's a good thing Tutu's not here, because he'd get mad. He'd say, that's the problem, you nice first world people. Dom Camera, who was my friend, he'd say, you know who he was? The liberation theologian from Brazil?
Yep.
He'd said, we brought him here to the Bay Area. You North Americans have to be healed and liberated from your virtue. Your silence is complicity with the killings around the planet and the systemic violence of poverty. Okay, so just sitting and being peaceful is not it. But the flip side is the 60s hardcore student activists against the Vietnam War, yelling and screaming and full of violence and horrible to their families. That's not it either.
Yeah.
So Gandhi and King are learning from Jesus this holistic nonviolence at every level. But you have to be involved in the movement so that your silence is not complicity. But as you're in the movement, that's why we need the spiritual life and all the tools of the church to deepen and learn from great people like Dean Malcolm, or the methodology of contemplative nonviolence and prayer and interpersonal nonviolence, so that we can continue the grassroots movement of nonviolence of Jesus and Gandhi and King to end war.
Yeah. So we have questions, but we don't have enough time for them all. But let me get my glasses.
Oh, we can skip the service. We can just
pretty soon they're gonna send somebody down after us.
Well, you could go up. I'll stay here and talk.
That'd be great. I'll just improv. John's on his way. While he's on his way, I'm just going to talk about the Gospel of Matthew, which is his favorite.
Putting on his glasses, that's not a good sign.
How would you pray with President Joe from Scranton, our devout president, now with the war in Israel and Palestine? That's the first one. Could you discuss faithful government, quote unquote, faithful government and law, our Constitution and current realities, the U.S. and the international courts? Could you talk about animal rights, the animal rights movement? What do you tell your family?
I think you better stop there. Those are big questions.
I know each one of them. They're great.
What's the third one?
How do you tell this is the fourth one. How do you tell your family who is being bombed how to oh gosh, I can't see that.
Well, that's enough.
Their children and family, yeah.
Well, you better hand them to me. So the first one, I would pray with Biden. First of all, I have tried to go and pray with Biden. And
you're not allowed in there anymore.
They arrested me.
Yeah.
We went and knelt down at the gates.
Yeah.
What's really funny, though, is my friends and I, we marched from we think we were the first people to march from the Dr. King statue beyond the Lincoln Memorial, Ken Butt again and Campaign Nonviolence, to the White House while Trump was president. And we blocked and knelt down in prayer and wanted to get arrested, and the cops wouldn't arrest us. That's even funnier, don't you? They're like, no, we need you here, kid. Just stay as long as you want. Shut the place down. Even the cops said that.
Take a soda?
Yeah, can we get you some coffee? It was amazing. And, I've been arrested so many times at the White House, and then next thing you know, friends now with Clinton. Jimmy Carter wrote me and invited me to come and give him a little day retreat, which I did. And I would just pray like I pray with you now, later. Just say, Jesus, help us put down the sword and take up the cross of nonviolence and stop all funding to Israel and abolish nuclear weapons and dismantle the Pentagon and all weapons of war. And let's fund with the same amount of money, $1 trillion, not only feed every hungry child on the planet and give clean water to everybody and jobs, healthcare, dignity, education, every human being on the planet. That's easy, the UN says. All that can be done in 2 weeks.
I know.
But then you educate every child and student and human being on the planet in the methodology of Gandhi and Kingian nonviolence and institutionalize nonviolent conflict resolution to help make a more nonviolent world. Biden knows this. He goes to Mass every Sunday with the Jesuits, friends of mine. And but see, once you get into that position, and I saw it as a kid, and then I learned it from the Berrigans and others, you're trapped.
Yeah.
And he's a slave now to the system. And that's the greatest curse of anybody, to have that power of violence. No one should have that.
Well, that was a good answer. And
you don't want me to, there is no such thing as faithful government.
Okay.
There isn't.
Well, that's good. That's a quick one. So
That's
let's
not possible.
Okay.
We are all called to welcome the reign of God. Dear friends, our citizenship is in the kingdom of God. We don't have time for America or Russia or wherever else. And I'm serious. And it really helps to get arrested and go to jail and not be able to vote, because then you're just a full-time citizen of the kingdom of God. How am I doing?
You're good.
No, you're not
Okay,
liking
so
it. That's the end of the funding for Grace Cathedral. No, just by that I mean, no, the purpose of a government is to kill, to protect its people. And we're talking about, can you have a nonviolent government, a nonviolent politics, nonviolent nation states? That's what Jesus is getting to with the kingdom of God. Gandhi wrote, and I read all of it, and dreamed about all of this. How do we get toward a nonviolent politics and a nonviolent government? That we're nowhere near that question now. But we need to all be asking that question and resisting every form of violence and lifting up that vision. This is what I'm going to talk about upstairs, of a new world, a new country and a new world of nonviolence. Otherwise, we are doomed.
Yeah. Well, so that's it. We have to stop.
But I'm just not
I know.
going.
Well, what's going to happen is this. We're going to wear you out completely down here. We just need to have you a little bit of a break.
Hey, isn't it great to be with Team Malcolm Young?
And you, John. What a blessing. Please join me on Sunday for not Sunday. Please join me online on February 7th at 6 p.m. when my guest will be Sean Casey, the founding director of the U.S. Department of State's Office of Religion and Global Affairs. We'll be talking about his book, Chasing the Devil at Foggy Bottom, The Future of Religion in American Democracy, and how understanding the role of religion in global politics is crucial for effective democracy. You're welcome to join us upstairs where John will be preaching at the 11 o'clock service. We rely on your support for the forum. Gifts of any size make a difference. There are many ways you can give, including texting the word THINK, T-H-I-N-K, to 76278. And John's book is on sale in the back. And I can't wait to hear what you're going to say up in Martin Luther King's pulpit up there.
He was here?
Desmond Tutu, Dr. King, James
that's
Goodall.
just name drop.
Everybody, just like all your pals.
Martin Luther King preached here?
Yeah, during the Selma action.
Wow.
Yeah. Every time I walk up there, I think about that.
He was so great, Dr.
He was so great.
You know, I read this essay by Toni Morrison recently, and she was asked, what do you think about Dr. King? She said, I can't think about him. I start to cry. All I can do is just say, Martin, I hope I'm not letting you down.
Wow.
And that's what you and I want to do.
Yeah, definitely. What great.
We're so privileged
Yeah.
to be in the time of Gandhi and Dr. King. And David knew Dr. King. And so may we all go forward.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Sean. We're so grateful to have you. What a great morning. Totally appreciate it.
Did we resolve everything?
Yeah, I think it's all done.
We've resolved.
Until next time.
Okay.